Hello, I guess we were recording. Okay. Hello. Welcome, Stacie
Oh,
Maxwell. Please
hey,
introduce yourself and what you do and what you're going to talk about today, please.
sure, absolutely. Thank you, James. I'm Stacie Maxwell. I'm Director of Insurance for On the Move Insurance Agency. Our flagship product is Secure Lease Tenant Protection. On the Move also has On the Move trucks as well. You've probably heard of us. We're the best truck rental agency in the whole industry. I've been with On the Move since August of 2024, so I'm relatively new. About what am I going on 8 months now?
Right.
So I have been in the industry though. This is my 25th year in the industry. So for well almost 2.5 decades, I was an operator with Universal Storage Group, heading up their marketing and training departments over there. So
Okay.
been around for a little while and decided it was time for a change of pace. And so now I've jumped into the fun world of insurance. And
So on the move, now I've obviously seen it at expos and shows and everything because this beautiful face was on there on one of
yeah,
their trucks.
absolutely. Yeah, you were one of my famous faces. Yeah.
Um, but tell me about on the move.
So the company itself was founded in the 70s by the Maury Westervale because he was a self-storage operator. He built his facility back then and built and had a couple of facilities. And he realized that something was missing, like the transportation quotient, getting people into the facility. Like he could help ease that. And so he decided to start leasing trucks and providing moving trucks for tenants and others, renting them to others in the local area. And that kind of grew into this, basically a truck leasing dealership.
Hmm.
And so they've been around for a very long time. They provide fully branded trucks, moving trucks, like think of, like the box truck or like the 14-foot U-Haul style. But they've created several patents and innovations on these trucks to make them easier to drive and easier to maneuver and more aerodynamic, things like that. So, but it's basically a complete turnkey solution for a branded moving truck for your facility. And they also, it's not just self-storage, they help real estate agents, they help home services companies provide, fleet trucks and things like that. So that is what we call the core side of the business, which is
Sure.
leasing trucks.
Sure.
Now, Maury also realized back in 2011, 2010, 2011, that having tenant insurance, some sort of insurance for the tenants when they move in was an imperative. And so he helped found the On the Move Insurance Agency to help provide not just tenant protection services, but also property and casualty insurance to facilities and operators out there. So that is the agency side of the company that I now run as director of insurance. So I should mention also that branched out from with the moving trucks, we have an insurance licensing program where when you lease a truck from On the Move, you have the opportunity to get the insurance licensing program, which allows you to allow anyone to drive your truck and you're still covered for the truck itself. So that's just a little protection there. So owners don't have to think about it. Don't have to worry about having a weird commercial auto policy or anything like that. They're covered with that licensing program.
So
So
basically you get a truck that has, like for top lock storage, right? So that's my
yeah.
branding. So I get a truck for my top lock storage and I have it parked out front and then people say, "Hey, I want to move in, but I can't get my stuff in there." So do you rent them the truck? I'm assuming you rent them the truck.
Well,
So you make
it
some
depends. That's up to the operator whether they want to rent the truck or just let them use it for free for move-in.
Okay.
I know at Universal we would always let people use it for free for move-in, and then they could rent it to move out.
Okay.
Um, so yeah,
Okay.
and that
So that
works.
so then
And
okay, so that starts and that's what I'm saying. I wanted to go back to the beginning of it so that way we kind of get how we got to how on the move got to where we are.
yeah,
Um so then you have this truck out there and it's branded for your business. So as it's going down the road, it's got your name plastered all
mhm.
over it. Sits
Rolling
out in front of the
billboards.
building,
Yep.
and depending on how busy it is, and it's a leasing company, so it's not like you have to buy the truck,
Right.
right? Every couple years, I'm sure they exchange them out for newer models or
Usually about
whatever.
5 years. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. Okay,
Yeah,
so
it is really cool. And there's different levels of branding, like the truck wrap package that you could, there's three different levels, from, low to fully
All
special, but
decked
we
out.
help coordinate all of that branding for you. The designers design it. You give us your brand, and we'll come up with a layout for you and keep massaging it till you're happy with it. And another opportunity that a lot of operators choose is what we call zero basing, where you can actually set up the back roll-up door, which faces traffic behind you,
Mhm.
with ad space that you can sell to other businesses in your local area. So maybe as a storage facility, you might have a real estate agent on there, you might have a plumber, you might have, I mean, dog grooming, it doesn't matter, but you sell that ad space and then that income helps you pay for the truck itself.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
yeah, it's kind of
Yeah.
nice. So we can set it up. It just depends on how the operator wants to handle their truck.
Yeah, and it's funny how you say that the marketing side of it, because like one of the things on one of our properties down at the coast, I keep pushing as an owner, I keep pushing like go to the marinas, right? Tell them, look, we want to put up a sign and we'll take
Mhm.
one of your signs back and put it up
Yeah,
at our place.
absolutely.
Let's get keychains that say, on this side it says Top Block Boat and RV, and on the other side it says Bill's Marina. And you just
Yes.
give them out to everybody, right? And they
Yeah.
give them out to everybody, and then that way we're scratching each other's back, and it doesn't it costs us maybe, you know, half the
Yeah.
amount because now we're doing it for each other.
That's right. And
So
building those alliances in your local market area is very, very important with other
yeah,
businesses. That's, as a operator for many years, training managers how to go out and market and build connections in their market area, that
yeah,
those business alliances they're worth their weight in gold,
yes,
to share those referrals back and forth. So yeah, absolutely a huge proponent of getting to be friends with all the businesses in your area. And so that the ad space on the back of the truck is another way to do that. And
right.
also allowing your truck to be driven for charitable reasons, like maybe, let local charities use it to go pick up donated items and bring it back, or, deliver donated items, things like that. I mean, the
Churches,
more
stuff
you
like
get
that.
your brand on the side of that truck rolling around your whole market area, the more it
Yeah.
gets seen and the more people
Right. And
recognize. And
and not to mention that, people say like, hey, did you guys rent this truck? Oh no, they donated it to us because we're a
yeah,
church or whatever. And then
right.
they're like, now you had kind of have, neighborhood clout. Like, wow, they're nice people over there type of thing,
Yes, that
and
goodwill marketing. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
which is great. I know
Yep.
we're a little bit off topic, so I
Oh,
just
that's fine. I mean, I'll talk about anything.
I'm very interested in how play how it starts with when people just decide that this is what they're going to do. Like
Mhm.
everybody has a, a start story of how they got to where they are. Obviously, you've been in the business for a long time,
Mhm.
taking on a new challenge or a new career. Um, good for you.
Thank you. Thank
That's a
you.
big jump. I did the same thing a couple of years ago, so I can applaud it because with the eyes, I
Yeah.
forcefully retired from being in the chemical industry for 25, 30 years, and all of a sudden,
Hmm.
here I am, 16 properties deep and
Hmm.
self-storage, and I'm just like
For
I
you.
why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do this 25 years ago, right? I'd be
Right.
retired and sitting pretty right now, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it's interesting to see how you got to where you are, and then how the business that now you're committed to this company where you're
Hmm.
like, knowing the story of how they got there is I find it interesting because then it tells you where they're going.
Yes.
It tells you how, like, and I know some companies obviously intimately where I go, wow, they started out like this and now they're this, and
Hmm.
you go like, wow. So it makes it plausible for everybody who's, buying their first property or, um, you know, I'm trying to think the word growing was my lack of words, expanding their business, like, hey, I do construction, so now maybe I'll do plumbing and,
Yeah.
or maybe I'll buy a plumbing company or maybe I'll start and in storage, there's so many different, it just keeps growing. Like me
Yes.
personally, I don't want to grow past being an operator. I mean, an owner, not an operator, an owner, only because I want to be that far away. But at the same time, I like to keep those people in my group and my network and friends because they teach me stuff. And on top of that, like I know where my resources are, it's my Rolodex of people, right? So if I have questions, I flip through my Rolodex of people. So, all right. Anyway,
Yeah,
let's go back to why we're here. We want to
sure.
talk about tenant insurance and tenant protection,
Yes,
um, and what you see the differences are. What explain to
sure.
us newbies.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So, um, I guess it kind of lends itself to part of my reasoning for choosing the company to go with that I did and the opportunity that I chose when I decided I needed a career change, or more like a change of venue. I wanted to stay in the industry, but a change of venue. And so tenant protection and tenant insurance are very similar in a lot of ways, but they're very different in a lot of ways as well. And I think the differences are the key in my decision in going with the tenant protection product, to represent and to promote to the industry. Um, so with when somebody moves into a storage unit, I'm just going to break it down like we're all new.
Yeah,
When somebody
absolutely.
moves into a
Please.
storage unit, it is in most states, it's a material condition of their rental agreement that they have some sort of insurance coverage or protection on their stored contents, because the facility itself in the rental agreement is not liable for the contents of their unit. And a lot of times there's a limit of liability that they will ever assume anyway, around $5,000 written into that policy or into the lease agreement. So the key comes down to who has care, custody, and control of the contents of the unit, the three C's. So the tenant is the person who actually has care, custody, and control because they maintain control of the unit by having their own lock on the unit. They're the ones who care for the contents, they control the contents, and they have custody of it by the lock on the unit. So that is their stuff. The facility owner and operator, they don't have care, custody, and control. You're renting space in order to create that care, custody, and control of your content. So we are not liable. That belongs to you. You have to cover your goods, your stored goods. So as an operator for a long time, you're leasing a unit to a person and you say, well, you have to have some sort of insurance coverage for your unit. Back in the day, we used to say, what would you like to do? We offer a tenant insurance program here, or you could use your homeowners. Well, I've learned, through years that using your homeowners is a really terrible idea, because if you do have a loss, it's going to impact your homeowner's premium. You're going to be subjected to much higher deductibles, and it'll affect your homeowner's policy going forward. So using your homeowners is no bueno. We don't want to do that. We want them to take a specific self-storage coverage option. So that boils down to tenant insurance versus tenant protection, right?
Mhm.
So as an operator for a long time, we sold tenant insurance. But truthfully, none of us as managers or as the operators, we didn't have an insurance license. So we technically could not sell tenant insurance. We did have someone on staff who had a license at the corporate office level. So that allowed us to offer, we couldn't sell it, couldn't talk about it, couldn't explain the difference between, what it covers in your homeowners or anything like that. Because you're not a licensed agent, you cannot actually sell it. You can
Is that
only
kind of
say,
like a real estate broker versus a real estate agent?
I
Kind
think
of like
so,
that?
yeah.
Kind of
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So you can't really get into the details with them. If the tenant moving in needs details and needs to understand it better, you have to give them the phone number to the insurance agency that you're using, whoever that agency is, and they have to call them directly. So the contract for tenant insurance is between the tenant and the insurance company. So in that situation, every single covered unit at your property that is covered by tenant insurance has an individual policy number. They have a direct contract with the insurance company, and you're just the middleman. So when a tenant comes in and they've had a loss on their property, like let's say, God forbid, rats get in and destroy their sofa, right? And vermin is usually a covered loss, and
Sure.
that's fine. So they come to you as the manager and they say, James, rats got in my unit. My sofa is completely destroyed. I'm so upset. I need to file a claim. What do I do? I know I had coverage. What do I do? And all you can say is, I am so sorry that happened. Here's the number to the insurance company. Give them a call. I can't help you. You literally have to tell them, I can't help you. I'm not an agent. I'm not who you contracted with for insurance. And I can tell you from decades of operating that a lot of our negative reviews, when we received a negative review, it came from a place of that person being so frustrated because they experienced some sort of loss in their unit. They needed to file a claim, and they feel like the manager behind the counter should be able to help them, and the manager can't, or your hands are tied. And so with tenant insurance, you do have to have that policy in place where you just, I'm sorry, call the insurance company. So if you choose tenant insurance, you really need to make sure you're choosing a really good, sturdy company that will take care of the tenant. They will, answer those calls. They will guide them through, hold their hand, because that is a reflection of you at your facility. How that is handled, by the claims handler with the insurance company, that is going to reflect on your facility, because the customer ultimately still thinks that you have care, custody, and control of their items, and you don't. They have it, and that's a distinction that's not made clear to the tenant. They just move in. They think, I've got it at your place. You're going to take care of it for me, but that perception is false. So with tenant insurance, I experienced a lot of frustration, especially with managers, because most of your managers want to help people. They want to guide them through, and we'll go take some photos, and I'll help you with the claim form and things like that. But you can't do that with insurance. So what led me to choose working for a tenant protection company is, with tenant protection, the insurance contract policy is between the facility owner and the insurance company itself. So the facility purchases, this is the way I kind of like to explain it. And Damon, you may want to chime in here too on this too, because this is like I do, but you may be better. But my analogy is, if the insurance company buys like one giant policy for the entire facility, and then when a tenant rents a storage unit, they are offered the opportunity to purchase a slice of that policy to cover the contents of their unit. So it's kind of like you're just sharing your insurance coverage with them. That means that because you are the operator, your policy and contract is with the insurance agency, which is the agent. You don't have to be an agent in order to sell a slice of your coverage. You're sharing your coverage with your tenant for a small fee that they pay with their rent. So you can absolutely speak about the coverage. You can talk about what it covers. You can help them fill out the claim forms. You can walk them from A to Z if they have a claim, because it's your policy and you're sharing it with them. So you can talk about the policy that you've purchased.
To cut it, I hate to say cut it shorter than that, what you're doing is you're becoming almost the agent to the broker as an owner.
Almost, kind of, yeah, but you don't have to have a license. You don't have to have
I know, I understand.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, because like I understand that like real estate agents have to have a license and brokers have to have a better license, right? But I'm saying, like, so with insurance, there's the person straight to insurance. With protection, there's insurance, there's
regular.
the owner, and then the insurance. So it's kind of like a middleman.
Yes, kind of like
It becomes it's like well, it's acknowledged negligence in some piece to make it where it's not insurance. But the reality of it is, if you have a properly run protection program, and they do a good job. I mean, Stacie coming aboard has been able to kind of take a nice, kind of a different stance to how they're doing things. But in general, it ends up becoming you have your company that will support you when you are, from the ownership standpoint, taking part in assisting or helping as claims are going on and happening, and they end up becoming, in a way, kind of a shoulder to lean on, right? So that you can support the owner, and it's a partnership. All of these, the one thing that people need to realize is you have to go in knowing that this is going to be a partnership mentality, because you are accepting a company to take care of your tenants, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
that's all I'm going to jump in. I'm not going to hijack this.
No, but I appreciate that.
That makes sense, because now what happens is, as a tenant, I know that I have a representative, let's call it, in my storage manager or owner, whoever's running that facility. They have somebody to lean on as their representative to the insurance company. So it could be a couple different levels in there. But let's say, as a tenant, I put my stuff in there, I have a claim, I have tenant protection, I go to the manager and go, hey, I have this claim, and they say, okay, hold on a second, let me get a hold of the company that the tenant protection's through to lean on. And then they go, okay, we'll handle this part. You handle this part with the tenant. And then they go to the insurance for that part.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I'm not sure exactly how others do it, but I can tell you, we just did a claims handling webinar with our secure lease clients last week. Just kind of like manager claims handling training. And so there's really just 5 little steps that a manager needs to take to get the ball rolling for the tenant, and then they can step out of the way, and the tenant can deal directly with the insurance company from
Okay.
that point. So it's kind of nice, the tenant comes in, look at their claim, you're like, yep, this is a claim, let's get you your claim form. I'm going to fill out my parts of the claim form. I'm going to print these 3 reports that you need, because they need their tenant ledger, they need their rental agreement, and they need their signed insurance or protection addendum showing, and that just basically shows, yes, I rent here, yes, I have the coverage, I signed to accept the coverage, and yes, I've been paying for the coverage.
Right.
So your premiums have been paid. So you'll need that with your claim form. And then, Mr. Jones, did you take any photos of your claim? If not, go out and take those photos. While you're taking your photos, documenting what happened, I'll fill out my side of the form. And, because I've got to give my statement, I've got to give the policy number that covers, everything, and some information there. And then you hand the tenant the form, you hand them the paperwork that you printed for them. They may have their rental agreement, they may have their addendum. If they don't, you print it for them, but you definitely need to print their ledger showing they've made the payments, because they won't have that. You hand that to them, and then you say, okay, you fill out the rest of your form, take these documents, your photos, in the completed form, and upload it through our claims portal. And I think you guys have a online claims portal too, where the tenant can just go and upload those forms. And then once they've done that, they'll receive a claim number and a tracking number for that claim. And they can go back to the portal at any time and check the status of it and see where the claim is. I believe you guys have an in-house claims adjuster like we do. So if they have any questions, they can call our claims adjuster and get their questions answered, check on progress, and the ball is rolling. So the difference in that situation compared to tenant insurance is, with tenant insurance, the customer walks out the door with a phone number and a sense of loss and bewilderment, and they don't know what to do next. And that's the moment when most of those bad reviews would occur. Like, my, rats got into this facility, ruined my couch, and the manager said, I'm sorry, we can do nothing for you. Call this number. And that leaves that tenant feeling awful and with a bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah, it
But
makes them feel like they're not looking
but
out.
then when they leave after dealing with the tenant protection program, where we're actually able to serve them, the ball is rolling. They feel like something has happened. They've got a claim number, they got a number to call if they have questions, and they know something is in motion getting them taken care of. And that's a huge difference in perception to the tenant, the end user there. So I just think that I feel really comfortable promoting a tenant protection program because of the level of customer service that you're able to provide to that customer, to that tenant. And that's huge to me. It's all about taking care of that end user tenant, because in self-storage, if we don't have tenants renting units, then we got nothing.
Right.
So we've got to take care
We
of
got
those
empty
people.
space.
Yeah, you got space.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that's and I talk, and a lot of people that aren't in the business, and I talk to them and they go, well, what do you do? Well, I'm in self-storage. And they go, what do you mean you're in self-storage? I go, well, basically I rent space to people, and every month they pay me.
Yeah.
And they go, well, what do you mean? And I go, well, you know what a self-storage facility is, right? Yeah. Well, when you open up that door, you got a 10 by 10 unit. It's just space.
Space.
Okay. They put all their crap in there. I mean, valuables in there, and they stack it up, and they shut the door, and hopefully they forget about it and they're on auto pay.
Get them on auto pay and let them forget about it. Yeah.
Right.
They only reach out once a year when they get a rental increase.
Correct.
Hopefully they won't even sniff at that.
Hopefully then they don't either. They just kind of go, well, I've had it there a while. And I mean, it's the whole thing about it is funny, because I've used, and I've discussed this before on different Zoom meetings that I've had. I've used storage one time, and it was because I had to, right? And because my house sold 3 months before my house was done being built. So, I had 2 kids, I had beds and furniture, and I was like, TVs. It was back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I had a 61-inch projection TV, so I had to have climate control, so that didn't go bad,
Yep.
like, and I look at it now and I go like, wow, and I rented for like 3.5 months. So did it, maybe it cost me, $220 or something over that couple of months.
Yeah.
But the whole time I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get this stuff out of storage for a couple of reasons. One, to live, and
Right.
two, because I'm paying for space, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
now on the flip side of it, I'm like, nah, take it easy, and
Yeah.
no rush. Take your time. You can keep it in there a couple more months. It's not gonna
Yeah.
hurt.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting too. I've rented storage twice in my life also. Once when I was between uh moving from one home to another, like your situation, and then
Mhm.
the second time was after my divorce, my first marriage, and I
Mhm.
needed to put, half of my stuff in while I, recouped from that.
Yeah,
And both times, the second time I rented, I should say, I was already in the self-storage industry. The first time I rented, I was not. I had
right.
not gotten in it, but it was right before I got into the industry. And the first time I walked in and didn't know what I was doing, I was, I just
No clue.
and the lady asked me, "What are you storing?" I'm like, I'm storing an entire 3-bedroom home." And
Yep.
she's like, "Okay, you need a 10 by 20." And I'm like,
Right.
"Okay, I didn't know." And
Yeah.
then we put, we didn't have a whole lot. We were young, and so
Sure.
even though we had a 3-bedroom home, it wasn't full of furniture, so we had a lot of empty space in there, and we didn't think anything of it. Just rented the place anyway. And but as you learn and you experience more self-storage and deal with customers, you know that you can upsell a like a more preferentially priced unit that has better placement in the facility, close to an elevator, something like that, for a higher price, but the unit is actually smaller because they're going to stuff it full. But
Right.
it's higher price than the one that's way in the back corner that's
Right.
larger, and it's just different ways of dealing with things. And
Right.
I just think it's so interesting. And you had mentioned, I just lost my train of thought. You had mentioned wanting customers to stay as long as possible.
Right.
So another thing there is, as operators, it's helpful for us to go after commercial tenants,
Right.
service people, or we used to go after pharmaceutical company reps, and they've changed their policies now, and they can't do just self-storage anywhere anymore because of
Right.
drug laws and things. But
Sure.
those type of commercial customers the business is paying the bill, and they
Yeah.
get the invoice and it's on auto pay, and they don't sniff at it, and they stay forever. The length of stay for those is years, where the average length of stay for most residential is, 9 to 10 months, something like
Right.
that. So
My
I
oldest
just think it's
brother,
interesting.
which some of you may have met in conference and everything, but he was in the healthcare field.
Mhm.
So he was a respiratory therapist, but he ended up working for a company as a I I would be wrong telling you his title, but he was selling um the respiratory equipment,
Mhm.
ventilators and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And he had 2 units that they paid for,
Mhm.
and every once in a while they'd come back to him and ask him questions about it, and he told me these stories. They say, well, what, why do you need this, why is this unit $260 a month? You go, well, do you want the equipment to get moldy and musty, and like, I can go down to the $80 one, but
Yeah.
also I want it's climate controlled, and it's, it fit, I can walk around in there, I can set things up in there, use it almost like a little shop temporarily.
Uh-huh.
Obviously you don't want anybody storing things in
Doing
there
business.
and uh,
Yeah.
doing work in there, like construction and
Right.
stuff. But when you open up a box, and and you need to set it up a little bit before you take it to a customer,
Mhm.
he could do all that right there. And he said,
Yep.
sure, you guys can, if you think you can find me a better deal, go right ahead. And then they just go, nah, don't worry about it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
he's got 2 units. He's paying 260 a month. One's just storage, and one's like his little workshop, on the road workshop, where he stops by
Right.
there, goes to a client, as he swings by, he needs a demo unit or whatever. He just swings in there. And so you have to take it
Ready.
home. He didn't have to, he doesn't take up
Yeah.
his space at home,
Mhm.
and then when he was done and he retired, he literally just gave the keys to the next guy. And the
Mhm.
next guy had it already set up, and they're going to continue to pay. So
Yes,
that's the
yeah,
kind of,
it's
I
fabulous.
agree.
And that's actually brings me, that's a good point that you bring that up, the succession of the unit between employees, if it's a commercial customer.
Mhm.
When you rent a unit to a commercial customer, you need to rent it to the company and have the person who's signing be the representative of the company, and then they can change hands.
Right,
Because the lease is in the company's name as a
right.
commercial lease. So
Yeah,
that's just a hot tip. We ran into issues with that where we rented it to the actual, just the person, even though the company was paying the bill, but then, that person says, well, I'm not going to use it anymore. I'm going to hand it over. I'm like, no, 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 you've got to come, we got to bring both of you in. We have to do a transfer of rights. We got to
right. New
change the
lease.
whole lease.
Right, right.
So yeah, that's a good point.
We've
That's a
been pushing down in Fulton. There's a lot of construction going on down there. We've been pushing a lot of small businesses to use our facility to rent the I don't want to call them the bigger units because it's all boat and RV, so they're all bigger.
yeah,
But the smaller of the bigger units where, they're 13 by 30,
right.
it's a nice boat in there, but
Yeah.
it's perfect for, a guy that's got a construction company that has an apartment. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, a lot of you don't know what people's home life is like.
Right.
So you promote it, you say, hey, look, and you give them a deal because
Yeah.
now you got them for a couple of years.
Hmm.
So if you get them in there, and just like any facility happens, you get them in there at the $1 for the first month, and then by the way, the second month is
Yeah.
$300, but now they're locked in there for however long, and then on top of that you throw in some tenant protection,
Mhm.
some admin fees, depending on what you have to do to, sell them locks, whatever,
Yeah, or sell them 24-hour access if they're a construction business. They probably
right,
need to get in there before the gates open at 6 or 7, you
right.
know?
So what we do too is we have like spider door,
Mm-hmm.
so they can access with their own code, and
Mm-hmm.
and they're not all not every one of the big buildings that they're older have overhead lights in them. So
Mm-hmm.
like we tell them, like, look, oh, you want to have this one? It's got overhead lights,
You want to be able to
and
see
now
what
it's
you're
more
doing.
expensive, right?
Right,
Because now if you
right.
show
Yeah.
up at 4 a.m. and because it's a boating and community because it's next to the coast, like a lot of people they show up at 4 o'clock in the morning to pick up their boats. So
Yes.
you want to make
Oh,
sure you
yeah.
have good lighting in there, and make
Hmm.
that facility
And
um, tenant friendly.
tenant friendly, yeah, and offering trickle electricity too is another big thing with
Correct.
boats. Especially, my husband is a bass fisherman, so he's got his boat, and we have a line that goes out to where he
Yeah,
keeps the boat, and that he's got like a thing in the backyard for it, and
yeah,
we have a line out there for that specifically to keep that motor charged,
right.
or the battery charged, so he can
Yeah, yeah,
crank the boat. The
yeah.
worst
Oh,
thing
I
you want to
know.
do is get to where you're putting in your boat and it won't crank.
I
So
got a classic car parked in the garage. I keep it on
yeah,
a battery tender, so I
yes.
understand. Because
Yeah, but
even
that's
if
another upsell. That's another ancillary service you can offer to make a little extra money.
yeah,
So,
and then I tell you, and people when you talk to them, you say, well, how can I make more money? Well, besides increasing everybody's rent, you know,
mhm.
go to
Which
the
gets fatiguing for
free
tenants.
stuff first.
Yes,
Stuff that doesn't cost you anything to do. You
right,
know, like I
right.
had a gentleman ask me something. I was talking to them about boat and RV storage, and he says, "Well, my buddy's got a piece of land, and it's right near a marina, and he wants to start a storage business." And he's because we're talking about Rockport and Fulton area, and I said, "Well, the easiest thing for him to do is fence it in,
Mhm.
put a gate on it, and rent the dirt."
Yeah, rent the
And just
dirt.
say, okay, this spot's yours. It's going to cost
Yeah,
you $150 a month to
yeah.
park here.
Throw some number plaque along the fence. This here's a slot, here's a slot, here's a slot. And
Cheapest
just
thing
rent dirt.
first, and
Yeah.
but a lot of people don't even they think that they have to go out of their way and spend money to make money. Now, I understand that in most cases that's accurate, but you've already spent the money. You have the facility. You're owning the land,
Mhm.
or you're buying the land, however you want to look at it.
Mhm.
But it's already there. Utilize it. Some of these
Yeah.
places, we're going to
As long as
expand in a
the
couple of years. So that extra 2 acres back there is just we're just waiting. And I'm like, what do you mean you're just waiting?
Use the
Fence,
space.
fence it in. Fence
Yeah.
that, you're going to fence it in later anyway. Fence it in and start putting boats and RVs and cars and whatever else out there,
Right, because eventually if you decide to build on it, build another building back there, you just phase those people out. You non-renew their, because it's a month-to-month lease, you just
Sure,
non-renew. Just give them
sure.
plenty of notice that we are going to be converting this. I've actually done that as an operator with several facilities where we had built-in phases, but we were using that land for parking, and then you just slowly phase them out and start building, pour the
Yeah,
slabs, get it going.
yeah,
But you not just renting that space, but renting them 24-hour access. Like give
yeah,
them an extra $5 a month.
right.
But a $5 extra month on 40 units, that's going to add up.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
mean,
especially when you get to 500 units,
right,
and then,
right. And
and then you
because not
add your tenant
everybody,
protection program where, there's certain splits
yes,
what you sell,
yep,
and to me, it's as an owner, it's funny because you don't want to nickel dime them
right,
and make it so that they don't want to rent. But
right.
at the same time, you want to be competitive, obviously, with your street rates, and
Hmm.
then ancillaries, you know,
Hmm.
um,
All the add-ons.
all the add-ons, but
Hmm.
make them feel that it's worth it for that extra money, whatever it may be.
Yep,
Hey,
yep.
when you're selling tenant protection, let's call it, boat and RV, you're selling
Mhm.
tenant protection. There's stuff that goes with with boats and RVs. You got a trailer that has lights on it. You got, what I
Mhm.
mean, and you back it as you pull out, you snap one of them off at the place.
Or somebody
What
backs into it and breaks the light.
somebody backs into
Something
it,
like that.
breaks it, and you're not there,
Yeah,
right?
and we offer with Secure Lease. We have part of the Secure Lease program is Secure Outdoor, so we actually do protect boats and RVs and automobiles and the contents of the automobiles. We
Right.
cover any OEM parts on the automobile. If like let's say you have an RV with a TV in it, somebody
Right.
breaks into your RV and steals your TV, well, that's covered as long as we can show forcible entry where it's actual burglary of the unit
Catalytic
of the
converter.
RV. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So and we cover catalytic converters because those are OEM parts on the vehicle.
Sure.
So it's just I don't know, it's important to as an operator to understand the services and protections that are available that you can, you know, sell to your clients, to
Well,
your tenants.
there's so many different things like that I've noticed that I've never owned a boat, and I've never owned an RV.
Mhm.
But when you look into that boating and RV lifestyle, right? You
Mhm.
got life jackets and pads for your seats, and you got, fishing poles, and you got
Yeah,
buckets for this and buckets for that, and you got bait this and all those ancillary little things that you
equipment,
need.
all the equipment. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And he's
all it
got
takes is,
fish finders and navigation systems on boats. I mean,
yeah,
it's an expensive hobby, believe me. My husband has to
yeah,
have.
yeah.
It's,
So
and I can't, I mean, I think his greatest fear is that he, will pass away and I will sell off all his fishing stuff for what he actually told me he paid for it.
yeah, yeah. Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then meanwhile you're like, what? This guy just said this was 800 bucks. Cedric, he has his hand raised. He has a question.
sure.
So go ahead and call on him.
All right, thanks, James.
Cedric, you can just
My
speak up.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Whenever you
okay.
talk, you don't have to raise your hand because you're dealing with a blind guy. So I almost didn't see that. So
All right, no problem.
yeah.
My question with the tenant protection is, does everyone who rents from you have to have it? Do you have to sell it to them? Do they need it? I mean, well, not need
They
it,
need it.
but I
Yeah,
mean,
they do need
yeah,
it.
I mean, they need it, but do they have to purchase it?
Well, it depends. It depends on how the operator wants to operate, and it also depends on what your state lien laws dictate. If it is written into your rental agreement that they must have some sort of coverage, then it behooves the operator to try to sell it to every single tenant. Now, ultimately, in the long run, do they have to have it? No, they can sign and say claim that they are self-insured, but they're taking
Okay.
100% of the liability on themselves, and it's up to them whether they want to use their homeowners, which is not a great idea because if you do have a claim, you have that giant deductible and it messes with your policy premiums later on. It affects your policy. But they can just claim self-insured. Like I'm just going to, I know what I've got stored is less than $100. It's not worth a whole lot, financially, but it's worth a lot to me. Therefore, I'm paying to store it. So, I'm going to self-insure that. And they do have the right to do that. They technically don't have to purchase the coverage, but as an operator, you can't force them, but as an operator, it does behoove you to sell it to as many people as you can, because like James said, you are going to make a slice on that. You're not
Right.
selling it just to sell it. You're actually making a profit from it as well.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks.
You're
No,
welcome.
that's a good question because, you know, starting out into storage, I didn't know anything about tenant protection. I didn't know anything about any of the ancillary stuff, right?
Right.
Like you guys have trucks that you lease. I mean, you got U-Haul that will set up on your facility and you make a slice of that money. Like everything that you provide, you're going into business with them in a
Partnering with
sense.
that company.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's all, they're going to make money, you're going to make money. So not only does it benefit you on the cash in your pocket side, per month, but it also it affords you the security to tell your tenant, like you were saying earlier, this is protected, that's not, this is, that's not, and able to speak freely about it with them. And honestly, like I just talked to the car insurance company in New Jersey the other day, and they basically go like, oh, sorry, can't help you. And that is, as a customer,
It's so
that is
frustrating.
so disappointing. Like literally, I said, so quick, short little story, but I gave up my license because I don't drive anymore. I'm legally blind. Everybody that knows me knows it. So I stopped driving about 4 or 5 years ago. So I gave up my license, and just got a state ID. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to call my car insurance company and tell them that I no longer drive so that they don't have to put me down as a driver.
Right.
Right. So then my insurance should go down, right?
You would think.
No, it
Oh,
went up. In the
wow.
state of New Jersey, there's one experienced driver in my house and two inexperienced drivers in my house.
Oh,
Before it was even 2 and 2. And
right.
now it's 1 to 2, and my insurance went up. So, and the lady was like, I'm
Because
sorry,
the
there's nothing I can
probability, that probability
nothing I can do
factor.
about it.
Yeah.
And talk about frustrated. Not only did I do the right thing, and I know
You got
this is,
punished for it.
I got punished for it, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is, and somebody does that, they get the insurance part of it, and they probably feel the same way. I did the right thing. I come to you now with a claim, and you go, sorry, there's nothing I can do about it here. Call them.
All that number. Yep.
Oh,
But my stuff is at your facility. What do you mean you
right.
can't do anything for me? You can't
Right.
help
And I
me?
said that to the lady. I was like, but I'm insured with you guys. Like, don't you want to, like, it's almost discriminatory for me as
For sure. Yeah.
as an ADA thing, but I'm not going to push it like that. I'll just find a better insurance company. So,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, that's would happen, if somebody went to a different storage facility. If they're like, you know what, they can't help me. I'm not going to keep my stuff here anymore. Negative comment, negative Google review,
and negative referrals, they're, tell all their friends that they know that, this company didn't help me at all. Don't store there.
Yeah.
Where on the flip side, if you are able to take great care of them, then they're like, yeah, absolutely. I send people to you all the time.
Yeah, they were great. And and now my brother's here, and his
My
brother-in-law's here, and
Yeah.
because you guys really took care of me, and I tell everybody, and to me that's word of mouth is free, first of
Word of
all.
mouth is free. That's
And
right.
it's even better than advertising, because no matter how many times that you say, I use this product, somebody that comes up to you that uses that product goes, yo, that's some good product right there.
Yeah.
That is going to make it.
A referral is your lowest cost per lease. There's
Yeah.
no better advertising. None.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
Go ahead.
my question that I have now is, okay, so let's say if I'm doing this remotely, they go on my website, they purchase it. but now there's the claim, kind of like you guys were just saying, and they
Mhm.
come to me and they're like, okay, Cedric Storage, um, here I have a claim, like you guys were saying, my couch was ruined.
Mhm.
What happens then? At that point, do I just say, hey, call Stacie at Stacie Insurance and she'll take care of it? Or do I have to like get involved in some big, deep way?
You don't have to get involved in a deep way at all. There's just a couple of little steps that you would do because the tenant, there's going to be a claim form and the manager needs to give a manager statement on the claim form and also needs to provide the
Okay.
policy number that covers the facility and the facility address on that claim
Oh,
form.
okay.
So you would, fill that out. Also, you would need to provide a copy of the tenant ledger showing that the tenant has been paying for their coverage. They should, in most cases, they have their rental agreement and their addendum that says that they elected to take the tenant protection. Those two documents they need also. But once you've provided those things to them, that's kind of the heavy lift. That's all. It's not even it's a very light lift to get those things done for them. And then with our program and with Damon's program, we have an online claims portal. It just depends on how the protection company runs, whether it's an online portal or whether it's a phone number to call or maybe even old school fax it in, that kind of thing. But
The
you
fax
would guide
machine.
the tenant, this is how you're going to file your claim, because the tenant still needs to fill out the rest of their claim form because they have to give information about what was ruined, what happened to it, an inventory of the items and photographs of the loss as well, the documentation of that loss. So really, it's just a couple of things the manager needs to do to, get the ball rolling, and then they could step out of the way. And if the tenant has questions, they can either ask the manager or they can call the claims adjuster or the tenant and protection company and ask questions there. So it's
Okay.
Well,
pretty simple.
keep in mind, Cedric, when you run remotely,
Mhm.
and
Hmm.
you're doing the whole remote management, um, I had Bob Copper on here a couple of weeks ago talking about remote management.
I love Bob.
Um, there's not anybody there, so somebody has to be responsible for it, right? So if you
Right.
have remote management, you actually end up being, unless you have somebody that's working for you, you end up being that manager. So
Mhm.
as an owner operator going full remote on a place, keep in mind that there's still somebody responsible for that property.
Yeah.
So, the tenant protection, adding that into there, somebody's going to have to do something.
Mhm.
It's not
You have to
just,
have a protocol in
yeah,
place.
there's
Yeah.
got to be a chain of command of some sort.
Mhm.
And even if you trained your boots on the ground guy to take those calls, I mean, it depends on what you set up.
Yep.
Um, you know,
You could have,
we
I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry, James. I didn't mean
That's
to
okay.
interrupt. Go ahead.
We buy facilities that are certain square footage and above so that we can pay a manager to be on site. And
Mhm.
a lot of what we do or the third party management company that I use, that I'm very intimate with, what they do is they're people first. They feel that somebody should be on the ground, somebody that you can talk to, somebody that you can call on the phone, and actually talk to somebody.
Yeah.
But it's not 100% necessary. You can do remote management, but we don't want those phone calls. So therefore, we put somebody in line to take
Mhm.
those phone calls.
Yeah, you create a protocol for it. And with our program, we have posters that we send out to our clients that they can hang, in the office or wherever, and it's got a QR code to the claims portal. So if they have a claim, they can, scan the QR code, upload their photos, get the claim started. And there's a phone number on it they can call in and, reach out. So it really just depends on how you choose to operate your property. Being a remote operator, you might put signage out, because the signage is twofold. It advertises the tenant protection program, but it also has the place where, should you have a claim, scan here or call this number. And that way they can get the ball rolling there. So you just have to figure out what number you want them to call. And do you want them to go straight to the claims portal or do you want them to speak to your person first to kind of verify the claim and give them the paperwork, the tenant ledger that they need? That could be emailed to them easily, it doesn't have to be printed. So, and the claim form as well. So it just depends. You just have to figure out your protocol and how you want to run it. But there's
Okay,
options. I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. You can get it done.
Right, and they can purchase
absolutely.
it through the same website. They don't even have to like, because I know he's talking remote management. So that means, if there's not a person there selling it,
Mhm.
then you have to rely on those posters being up saying, do you have it? Or
Mhm.
somebody has to send out letters saying, you've been with us for
Yeah,
3 months now, we need you to, show us some proof of a protection or insurance or something. And
right,
depending on the state, you can kind of push it into their lap and kind of, I don't want to say make them take it, but
right.
promote it heavily that they take
Yeah.
it.
Hmm.
But if there's nobody there, then it's just like, oh, well, I don't need that. I only have $6,000 worth of stuff in there, and
Right.
then 2,000 of it gets wet, and now they're
Hmm.
like, what the hell? I should have gotten tenant protection.
Hmm.
There's nobody there selling that on site
Right.
when you have remote management.
Yeah. So
So,
in
so,
I'm
um,
sorry, Cedric, I was going to say real quick, in a
oh, go
remote
ahead.
situation, I would, you could put posters up, signage throughout the property. In a remote management, you may have more outdoor spaces, so you might want to do like more of a hard sign that's UV protected, things like that. But also, it would be really important to have information about it on your website and make sure that the tenant protection is a choice in the rental funnel when the customer goes to lease with you online, and that it's clearly explained that what it's for, and that it's a material condition of your lease, that, of their rental agreement, that they must have some sort of coverage. So that they
Right.
can sign right there, yes, I'm going to take the tenant protection, or no, I'm going to self-insure through
Right.
that rental funnel on the website.
And a little blue link that says learn more. So that way
Learn
when they
more,
go,
yeah, and have a whole
what,
page telling them about the
yeah.
whole program and what it covers and how easy it is. If you should God forbid you have a claim, this is
Yeah.
how you would handle it, and put that information right there on your website too. Yeah.
And you should be
Awesome.
surprised too,
Thanks.
Cedric, that not a lot of there's not a ton of claims in it. Because
Oh,
if there was a ton of claims, then people like Stacie wouldn't really have a job.
that's
So
right. That's
it's
right.
it's a catch 22. It's like,
Mhm.
that's what insurance, well, protection, but that's what insurance is for. Like I have insurance in New Jersey on 5 vehicles, right? And it costs me about 7 grand a year, right?
Mhm.
Well, what do I get for that 7 grand? I get insured that if I get into an accident, it's going to be taken care of.
You get
But
peace of mind.
every
You're selling peace of mind is what
right,
what
right,
yeah.
every year that I don't use it, I'm
Mhm.
$7 less or $7,000 less in my pocket.
Right.
But I was insured and I was
Mhm.
insured that if something did happen, I'm protected. So yeah, there's a little bit of selling that has to be done with it
Very-
as well.
Yeah, it's that you never know what could happen
Mhm.
thing. The elephant in the room is what could happen though, so you're selling peace of mind, in case the worst case scenario happens, you're still covered. It's fine.
Right.
We've got you. So,
And especially if you have a nice, like if you have a nice facility
mhm.
where, you got cameras up, you got a secure gate, you got, everybody's doors are locked, the facility looks nice. People are more apt to just go like, well, you know, I mean, it could hurt you and it could not hurt you. If it's a dingy facility and they're like, I'll put my stuff in here, this stuff might be gone tomorrow. I better get tenant protection. Or you have a nice facility and people go like, well, what if a storm comes through and blows some doors off? I mean,
Hmm.
crazy things have happened,
Yeah,
you
you're
know?
selling the what if. Yep.
Yeah,
With
it,
insurance, it's all
it
about the
is.
what if.
That's a good way. That's you're selling that elephant in the room that
Mhm.
could happen.
Could happen. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, Stacie, I think we're about at time anyway. Thank you so much for explaining that.
Oh,
How
thank you
can
for
people?
having me on. This is fun. I could talk storage all day. So yeah.
So can I. And that's a good and bad thing.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a great problem to have.
yeah, I wish that was my job. Like, I wish I got paid to just talk about storage all day
Yes.
long because that would be
We'd be
fun,
rich.
and I'd be rich, right? Yeah. So how does someone reach you?
You can reach me, Stacie, Stacie at securelease.com.
Okay.
Shoot me an email. That's probably the best way to do it. I do have a a work number. It's 830-443-3023. You could call me, leave me a voicemail if I don't answer, but truly the best way is just to reach out to me by email, and then we could just start a conversation. So
Then
Stacie,
you're also on
S-T-A-C-I-E.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm also on LinkedIn, Stacie Maxwell on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook too. You can find me there, but LinkedIn for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I appreciate your time and explaining some stuff to us, and hopefully if anybody watching this after, if they've made it this far, they have any questions, they can reach out to anybody. They can reach out to me. I can point them in the right direction. That's why I'm doing this. I learn stuff and I grow my network. So
yeah. Well, in self-storage, there is enough out there for everybody,
Sure.
and all boats should rise with the tide. And I think one of the great things about this industry is how willing we all are to share best practices and help each other and help overcome challenges. With
Yeah.
how did you handle this? Well, this is how I did it.
Yeah.
Or maybe have you thought of doing it this way? So
Yeah.
we're all here to help each other. And it's just a great industry, and we all get better together.
That's right. Well,
Thanks,
thank you so
Stacie.
much. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Cedric. Yeah, and thank you, James.
You got
All
it.
right.
See ya.